Hello, Guelph. My name is Mark Paralovos, and that rhymes with for all of us. And I'm the People's Party candidate for the Guelph riding for the city of Guelph. I hope you vote for me in October. And this is Jonathan Knowles. Today, we're going to discuss climate change, energy, and all of the realities that we're dealing with in Guelph. And Jonathan's the guy who would know. And Jonathan, if you could let everybody know who you are and what you do and why we're talking.
Absolutely. First of all, thanks for having this conversation. It's really good to get some of this information out in the community. My background is I moved to Ontario about 15 years ago. I was in transportation for about 10 years, and just recently in the last 7 or 8 years got involved in energy efficiency and sustainability, and have engaged on some of the task force over the last couple of years here in the city as a volunteer, but also run my own commercial industrial contracting business that focuses on energy efficiency and sustainability.
Very cool. I originally got your number from our climate change office manager, and his name's Alex Chapman.
Yeah.
And so I emailed Alex and I said, Alex, help me understand what Guelph is already doing for the environment, what the plan is essentially, what is realistic to expect us to be able to do within 5 years, 10 years, between now and 2050. And basically, Alex said, you're the guy to talk to. And I said, okay. He gave me some web links, and the links will be in the description when I get a chance to edit them. So sorry about that, everyone. And so take me through that. Let's see, how do we start? What are we currently doing? What has your organization and the city of Guelph agreed to, and what has happened so far?
So I guess to start out, in 2007, 2008, there was the initial community energy plan that was established. And it was done through engagement with consultants, engagement with the not-for-profit sector, social housing, academia, industrial, kind of a lot of the representative stakeholders that need to be consulted.
Right.
But the work was, it was a lot of information. It was a thick report, and it didn't necessarily outline, here are some, 10 first steps, and here's some milestones, and here's, how to evaluate whether you're achieving that. So our perspective was, hey, it's great that was done. It was one of the first plans done in Canada. I believe it was the first community energy plan that was established in Canada. So, that in itself was a great accomplishment. However, without implementation, you're not going to get the benefit. And with poor implementation, you could get disastrous benefit or results. Right. So we kind of saw, I was kind of watching from the sidelines, new to Guelph about 10 years ago, and I saw some of the information that was coming out around the district energy system. And then with that information coming out around the losses and how it wasn't viable economically, and I started to go, okay, wait a second, this is gonna turn out bad, because I know the difference between a bad technology and bad implementation.
Right.
And it's not fair to expect the rest of the public with the sound bites to know the difference between the two.
Right.
So the danger is that everyone's going to start hating energy efficiency or renewable energy because of some of the financial impacts that it had.
Right.
So that's when I put my hand up at that time and became part of the initial mayor's task force, which I think was in 2016 or 2017.
Okay.
And the purpose of that task force was to look at the 2008 plan and to say, let's refresh it. Things have changed over the last 10 years, so let's refresh it to today's reality. Technologies have become available that kind of change the feasibility of implementing one versus another.
Yep.
And let's put more, I'm a business guy, I'm an entrepreneur, so let's put together more of like a business plan approach around doing this initiative. It has to be socially viable, it has to be financially viable, and it has to be environmentally beneficial as well. Right. So those are kind of the three pillars that we looked at the overall initiative.
Okay. So from that initial meeting, from the mayor's task force, now you're the co-chair of
Our Energy Guelph.
Our Energy Guelph.
So that led to, originally it's supposed to be about a 6-month engagement with there was 22 volunteers that were on our community energy task force.
Okay.
It ended up being about an 18-month piece of work because of some delays with funding and delays with information that we were trying to get for statistics and analytical data.
Right.
But after the 18 months, we arrived with a really good updated plan. Okay. And the plan, and this is where sometimes the conversation diverges with people, is that it's not a predetermined outcome. Right. What it is, so it's an initiative more than it is a plan, right? Okay. So here's 25 different priorities that we saw based on economic benefits, based on social benefits, based on environmental reduction in environmental footprint. And it doesn't mean that that list of priorities is going to be the same for you as it is for me.
Right.
So you might say, I don't get behind 1, 2, 3, and 4, but I really like 5 because I like solar and I really like insulation for my home. So I'm going to participate in those but the rest is not for me.
Fair enough.
And that's okay.
Right.
Right. As long as there's one thing in the list that you can see some currency with, and hopefully we've given you enough information to see that there's that benefit for you,
Right.
that you, as one of the many actors in the overall stakeholder map, take steps towards contributing to the overall outcome.
Right.
That's probably the one fundamental definition that everyone kind of misses, because they go, well, how much is it going to cost? And how are you possibly going to get there by that time? And we're not pretending to have all of the answers.
Right,
we're
right.
just like, here's what we got right now. We generally know that this is the good direction to go in because it creates jobs, it reduces our impact on the environment, it reduces our operating costs and our household costs. So that all is a good thing.
Right. So you're making the case that aside from the environment, doing these things is beneficial for your housing budget, for your monthly budget. Doing these things is beneficial for your energy budget, right? Like if you're using 10 units of energy and you put some efficiency in your house, so you have an old house, you're using 8 units of efficiency. Okay. So we were talking, you and I, and one of my questions was, so that's where we are. We have this list, and your business, your private business, helps other businesses with efficiencies. Yeah. Fair enough, right? And there are other people who do stuff like that. There's solar, et cetera, right? Helping people get off the grid, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
And so when I reached out to you originally, it was to find out how much money Guelph has spent, like taxpayer money, funding from either the federal or provincial or anything to that effect. And you said, I think you had a 300,000 number?
Yeah, between the MAFRA funding and some of the city funding to
previous.
Do the overall update of all the plan work and the engagement with the 450 residents. And we did a bunch of community engagement events, and that was that initial budget.
Right. Okay. So that 300,000 was taken to undertake the study and to look at what we could do, and to look at the realistic next steps for local,
as well as gauge. It wasn't just the study, but it was also the first part of it, and what took a lot of it was meaningful engagement. Right. You know what government engagement looks like.
It's very difficult.
Right.
Yes.
And non-existent in some cases, or meaningless in the mechanisms they provide to actually participate in a lot of cases.
Right. Well, sometimes it feels like, from a citizen's perspective, somebody who has lived in Canada, it sometimes feels like it is already predetermined what the answer is going to be, and you're like, oh, so we're going to do this study now, like,
right?
All right, sounds good to me.
Right. So we approached it completely differently, where we ended up having conversations with over 400 Guelph citizens, right? So on the entire level of the spectrum, right, from the chief executive officer of a major manufacturing company to, the retired person that was a homemaker and doesn't have any technical understanding of this market, but just has some opinions around what they feel is important for their grandchildren, right? And we took all of that feedback and we said, this is what we believe that the community wants from an initiative like this. Okay. And that was kind of the guiding light that we then did our work with. And that's then the 25 priorities came out of that.
Right. And so the 25 priorities, I've read through them. One of them is autonomous vehicles, which don't quite exist yet. So, but you weren't, one of the things I wanted to get to today is, well, a couple of, there's so much I want to get to. I want to talk about a lot of things. The climate emergency in Guelph. My concern is that, for those viewing who don't know, on Monday, City Council is going to be debating a motion for City Council to put forward a climate emergency. And that has real implications, that has real consequences as well. And my statement, my thought process here is, I want to find out what we've got currently. And rather than throw the baby out with the bathwater and say, we've got to start over, find out what we've done and what we're on track for. Because not that that's not being reported in the paper, but I feel like we just had Jonathan and an entire committee do lots of work that cost a lot of money. It wasn't free, that set us on a path. And declaring this climate emergency seems like activism. It seems like getting the right words on paper and not having anything to back it up. And I'm talking about that federally. Mr. Trudeau, I think, is doing the same thing. He's got absolutely nothing to back it up. But I wanted to talk about locally, because local is where the rubber meets the road. We have to take the technology that we have, which is imperfect and not green in the current sense, and we have to live with the state of living, the standard of living, that's the word, the standard of living that we've come accustomed to. So unless Canadians are, and unless Guelphites specifically are willing to stop using fossil fuels, and I mean, there's a lot, computers, cell phones, cars, there's a lot that is done with fossil fuels. Sure. So having this climate emergency, in my opinion, is just words with a very flimsy backup. I wanted to see what our actual plan was and how realistic it is in the next 5 years to get off fossil fuels. I think it's probably not realistic, even by 2035, because in the year 2000, people were talking about exactly the same thing. And they were saying it's dire, it's gonna happen very, very soon. Okay, we've gone 20 years and life is very, very similar. Very, very similar. And we have a plan, we are working the plan, and we are limited by our technology still 20 years after the year 2000.
And by our capital constraints.
Yes.
And by the bandwidth of implementation, the feasibility, right? These are all real considerations that government or business or any individual needs when they're looking at implementing any kind of plan.
Yes, right.
Regardless whether it's a climate change plan or an efficiency plan or an HR policy plan or whatever it is. Right. So I'm glad that you bring this up, because this kind of, there's been a really great phrase, and I think the first person to use it was our Ward 1 councillor, Dan Gibson. Mm-hmm. And he kept saying, there's common currency in this plan. There's common currency. Mm-hmm. You don't have to believe in climate change for there to be something in it for you. Right. You don't have to believe in LED lighting for there's something to be in it for you. You can believe in active transportation. You can believe in insulation. You can believe more in renewables. You can believe in just good fiscal conservation, right? Yes, and maintaining a lean business to be globally competitive and not have to have pressure on headcount reductions, right? So there's all these different benefits here. And so for me, it was really one of the biggest challenges over the 2-year period for myself, as well as for my co-chair Kirby and Alex and everyone else who was kind of part of the leadership team on the volunteer task force, was managing this narrative to stay broadly acceptable. Right. Yeah. It was so many people wanted to take it off into an extreme channel, like declaring a climate emergency, that I said, I don't think that there's no concern around the environment, or I wouldn't be part of this. I wouldn't be doing, I wouldn't be contributing my life's work towards contributing to positively to this. But I don't think it's an emergency in the sense of we need to scream it's an emergency, and enact martial law and and like budget step? Be damned. Let's just do this. I don't believe that. I used kind of the analogy of, there's the person on the street that sees a house on fire with a family asleep and goes, "Oh my God, the house is on fire. They're burning to death. This is horrible, horrible, horrible. What should we ever do? Oh my God." A declaration. Yes, you stand around and go, point. Right. Or the fireman arrives, busts down the door, gets in there, pulls the people out. They may have sunburns on them. They may get burned themselves. The house might get a little bit damaged in the process, but they saved the family and they got it done. Right. And so it's the reality. We're the firemen, right? We're not interested in declaring the emergency. We acknowledge the urgency. Yes. The firemen would acknowledge if you said, "Is that burning building an emergency?" Well, yes, there's definitely urgency, and it is an emergency. But declaring it is not nearly as useful as putting some steps in place that is going to actually help the situation. Even if those steps are not perfect, as long as they're leading towards the solution of what the core problem is, then and they're meaningfully contributing. Sure. And so long as they're not making things worse. Like that's an important thing too, right? We don't have all the answers for what's happening to our world or in our world. We certainly don't have all the science in about the multiple layers of ocean and atmospheric pressure, et cetera, et cetera. The exact date and the exact pH level and the exact, Right. But
we got into a conversation. I'm going to go off in a bit of a different direction, but it relates. It relates to climate. It relates to running big infrastructure. It relates to poor management and poor running of big infrastructure. So because we were talking electricity and climate change, we were talking about the electricity delivery and how much it costs. And I said, I'm more interested in having people able to afford having the lights on and eating dinner at the same time in Ontario, right?
Yeah.
Because our energy prices are very high. And you said, right, but they're not the highest in the world. And I said, okay, where are they the highest though? And you said, well, North America. And I said, okay, fine. And not to
Europe, really.
Right.
Europe.
And so European electricity and energy rates are higher than ours, almost double. Absolutely. And I'm not trying to get you. I wasn't trying to say like you. Yeah. I just thought it was a funny conversation.
Yeah.
But the energy prices in Canada are high. Part of the reason for that is because we have Ontario, we have nuclear, and Ontario is really one of the higher energy prices in the world. The rest of Canada, Alberta, et cetera, not so much. But in Ontario, we've got nuclear, we've got lots of green power. And I said, well, that's great. But if we're paying the highest, saying just a little bit more on the bill is not great. And you said, but it's not about green energy or traditional energy, coal or whatever. You said it's about the delivery. Each level, and you explained it better. So if you can explain to everybody how much this costs, mismanagement costs way more than going green and solar and all that other stuff. And it's important.
So the Independent Electricity Systems Operator is a provincially governed body that manages the distribution of electricity within Ontario. So they're kind of responsible from the generation point right to the point of consumption, or to the point where the utility takes over, the local utility. And so within that, there's the high tension wires, there's the substations, the transformers, the step downs, all of those different components within the grid.
Okay.
That cost money to put in place, to then maintain, to fix, to manage.
Right.
There's also control centers saying, this part of the province needs this much energy right now because it's a really hot day in that area versus the other. So all of this stuff goes on. And the biggest issue was ignoring the asset renewal, as well as the true cost of the budget to grow at the rate that keeps up with the per capita energy consumption as you grow that population.
Right.
So the province then turned around. They said,
hold on. We need to explain.
Sure.
We need to explain just a little bit more about kind of the stepping down and what that looks like as far as if you get a new subdivision and it's all built up, and then all of a sudden we're going all electric cars. Like what happens?
That would overload the transformers. Right. There's a practical, technical barrier there that has to be considered.
Yeah.
Right.
So I just want to kind
especially
of
in Guelph. Actually, Guelph's one of the ones that's most loaded as far as the transformers go.
That doesn't surprise me. So on one side of things, we have a technical limitation. We have infrastructure that needs to be maintained, that costs money to maintain. And in the maintenance of that infrastructure, if you have a transformer that say capacity is 10, that's a small transformer, and it needs capacity of 100, now the infrastructure costs more to maintain, and more to upgrade, right? So in order to get to a situation where everybody can drive their electric vehicle and plug it in, we need to fundamentally look at the cost of upgrading our infrastructure. And that has nothing to do with green energy or anything to that effect. It has everything to do with infrastructure management.
Exactly.
Right. So when I look at this, when I look at the problems that we've got, I drive around Guelph and I see the potholes and I see our municipal money being spent in a way that is concerning, especially when I read in the paper that the most problematic thing in Guelph is climate change. Because I look around and I think that's not true. We have homeless, we have drug problems, we have drug addictions, all sorts of fentanyl, purple fentanyl, all sorts of this stuff happening in Guelph. And people are saying in 100 years, in 50 years, in 30 years, and I'm saying we've got problems right now. So this is problematic for me on so many different levels. But the level that gets me most upset and the most frustrated. Oh, sorry, we've got some people visiting. I apologize. The problem that gets me most upset and most frustrated is the fact that we're spending all of this money, $120,000 a year for a climate change office manager, and I don't know what he does, and that's a problem.
But let's back up for a second.
Yeah. Sorry, carry on.
So the infrastructure issue, you can take two paths.
Mm-hmm.
You can say, I'm going to spend billions of dollars refreshing the infrastructure with the current per capita energy consumption,
right,
as you grow that population,
right,
or you can say we can reduce the consumption on the grid,
right,
for millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars through incentives. So incentives that make technologies that might not be as financially attractive to you today somewhat more attractive to you. So maybe it's going to be attractive in a year or two when the rates are 25 cents a kilowatt hour instead of 19 cents. But if we put an incentive in place, they might be attractive to you this year.
Gotcha.
So that was where the ISO said billions of dollars or tens of millions of dollars.
Infrastructure.
I think reducing consumption to make room for the population growth and replace smaller pieces of the infrastructure at smaller amounts, that is better deployment of capital than just keep building it bigger and heavier. Right.
Yep.
And that's where, because a lot of people say, oh, rebates is a false economy and that's just a waste of taxpayers' money. And that's not right for the government to be giving out our money to get businesses to move on technologies that they would have otherwise done anyway.
Right.
In some cases they would have, in other cases they would have waited for many years and we wouldn't have gotten that capacity on the grid. I know because we deal with hundreds of customers and I understand their buying profile, right?
Fair enough, yeah.
So that is the fundamental focus of the ISO's rebate program is to make that space. This is an asset management play. But this is not about climate change because when you look at the carbon intensity of our current supply mix, our current generation mix in Ontario specifically, you're 92 to 96% carbon free, depending on the time of generation. If you go at night, it's almost 100% carbon free.
Right. Yeah.
So our business lowering commercial industrial energy bills has very little to do with carbon. It has a lot to do with asset management, their own internal asset management, their cost management, the environment for their employees and for their staff, and having proper lighting and heating and cooling and safe environment for their manufacturing and all of that other stuff. That is what we focus on. We say, you know what? If you use less natural gas for your HVAC system, like that's going to reduce your carbon footprint. But that aside, this is good business. Here's the business. This is good business.
And that makes sense to me. What I want to get to, what I want to see happen is the infrastructure in municipalities being managed and the infrastructure for electricity being managed in a way that is not seeing the spikes in use in price that we've been seeing the last couple of years in Ontario.
Right.
And you were saying, it's not climate change and all that other stuff. And I'm trying to kind of look at all of the factors because fundamentally, I think on a man on the street interview, people say, are you willing to pay more for green energy? And they say, yeah, sure, why not? A couple cents on a kilowatt hour. But then there's newspaper articles decrying people can't, it's food or heating their home or food or lights on or whatever. And that's a big problem. That's a big disconnect. You know what I mean? Right. On one side, the news is certainly saying, people don't mind paying more. And on the other side, there's a really, really big problem. And it's not all
whether
climate change.
They want to or not, they shouldn't have to pay. And in some cases, they cannot pay more.
Right.
So what we look at is what is going to be economically viable? What is also going to be socially beneficial? Right. And in some cases, those two things are the same thing. Right. A lower hydro bill makes it for a much less stressed mom that's trying to support two kids on her own on a couple part-time jobs. I know that personally, right? From growing up in that environment. Right. So there's social benefits when there are economic benefits in a lot of cases.
Sure. Yes.
And if we can accomplish those two while reducing our carbon footprint, then I get behind it 100%.
Sure.
If when there's a scenario where, so maybe, I don't know if you're ready at this point to talk about the 100% renewable and some of that. That's where where you start to lose me. Because.
Well, maybe we should explain what the 100% renewable stuff is. So you can let your.
Yeah. So it's almost like it's dangerous to say I'm not behind 100% renewable because it sounds like something that a climate change denier would say. Right?
Could be, yeah.
It just sounds like
trees are renewable. So, I automatically went to wood, right?
Right. And arguably nuclear is renewable. Right? Yep. So when I look at that whole case, I'm not going to say I'm behind 100% renewable because it aligns with my energy efficiency business, right? Because I could.
Yeah. Well.
But our business doesn't align behind things just because they sound good.
Yeah.
It aligns behind things because there's a lot of common sense behind it. And so when we're looking at, so there was a big back and forth over the course of the development of our updated community energy plan.
Yeah.
And we had one group that was really pushing and advocating for 100% renewable energy generation. So, and the actual definition of 100% renewable is to obtain 100% of your energy needs.
Mm-hmm.
So that includes electricity as well as natural gas, as well as fuel for the fleets or vehicles, from renewable sources. It doesn't mention efficiency in that definition of 100% renewable. It doesn't mention overall reduction. It doesn't mention net zero. So we said, no, it's not a negative message. There are some, like, by definition, cracks in that being a very kind of one lens goal.
Mm-hmm.
It's not something I think is safe as an organizational objective, because it drives bad decision making. We came up with the target of net zero 2050, not because it's a perfect goal either, but it much more provides for, and I think one of the individuals that delegated Abhi at the May 2018 council meeting on this topic when we were delivering a report said it best. It's a broad canvas through which we can have small steps in the right direction. So maybe you're still gonna use natural gas at home because you can't afford $20,000 to replace your furnace and go to something like an electric fire or a heat pump, right? Maybe that's not feasible, but that's okay in net zero,
right?
Because that one didn't pass the sniff test on the financial business case, but maybe you're okay with a low flow shower head.
Fair enough. So I just want to explain what net zero is. Net zero is essentially carbon credits, right? So like if you have to drive to work and, well, I mean, your example is better. The furnace in your house is not financially feasible to be replaced, but the furnace at work maybe. So it makes more sense to do that than to do your home.
Exactly. And maybe you don't buy an electric vehicle today because you just got one 3 years ago, but when you buy a new vehicle in 3 years, when that one's used up, you should look at the finances around electric vehicle, maybe. Right?
My question for electric vehicles is,
the overall carbon footprint.
Are many, right? Because you have to ship you have to get the battery mined for lithium in Afghanistan or East Asia, and then you have to have the battery manufactured in China, and then you have to have the battery shipped to Tesla or wherever, Chrysler, wherever it's being made. And then once all that's done, then you have the CO2 from the production of the car. Then you have the car being shipped to the manufacturer. Then you have the disposal of the battery after it's been used. I don't know, because what is the environmental impact of laptops and batteries like this? Because there's, well, at least one for everybody in Guelph and probably one for everybody in Ontario. So, and I've got two because there's a laptop sitting here. So that's a lot of batteries. Do we know the environmental impact of that? I don't know. And
this is why we don't pick technologies, and we don't say, actually the notation in the one of the articles that came out saying we want 100% autonomous vehicles is not part of our plan.
Okay.
It's part of the other group, actually.
Oh, okay. I saw 100% autonomous, and I thought that's a little weird.
In the article, they misquoted us because we're not about saying thou shalt.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
We are about saying you can, and here's some information that might help you identify that you're part of the group that would see benefit in this technology or this approach.
Fair enough.
And so we're all about empowering those people to participate. And so, Owens Corning, they run 24/7, and they had some inefficient systems over there. Since 2006 or 2007, they've had a sustainability plan in place globally.
Right.
We're a leader type organization. And they're doing it because it's lower operating costs. It is lowering their environmental footprint. And so for them, that made a great business sense for them to invest hundreds of thousands of dollars into lowering their energy costs and lowering their costs on their lighting. They were participating in our net zero 2050 by doing that and making that decision.
Before it even happened.
Exactly.
So the last thing that I want to talk about is carbon taxes. And just because we've been talking for, half an hour, so that's pretty good. So the last thing I want to talk about is carbon taxes. I have done some reading, and the way the carbon tax is being rolled out in Ontario, New Brunswick, and provinces that do not agree with Justin Trudeau and who are trying to, like Doug Ford said recently, Doug Ford's plan was reducing carbon, but the federal government rejected it for whatever reason. So who knows? So you can only do your own plan if Justin Trudeau agrees with it. But Justin Trudeau's plan is a carbon tax. So I want to ask you, because again, you should know, will a carbon tax help your organization, like the Energy Guelph organization? The fact that it's implemented and that's the answer says no.
Yeah, it's obviously a broad question,
right,
but
it is.
What I can say is I don't think it's the most effective mechanism, and that there should be some kind of financial motivation to participate in overall reduction, but it shouldn't be so punitive that you die in the process, right? Like when you're treating something, you try not to kill the person you're treating,
yes,
right?
Right. Yes.
So I think that's more important than being extreme in the treatment.
I would agree with
right?
that. Yes.
So that's kind of how we look at it, and we say, what's feasible from all the different lenses, right? And just putting, often, sometimes they say that simple solutions are the best solutions, but sometimes simple solutions are not effective because it's a complex problem.
Right. Yes.
And you can't just say, oh, I got it. Let's put solar everywhere. Or I got it. Let's just charge everyone double for energy. Like, it doesn't work like that, right? You can drive all of your businesses out of the province and eliminate all the jobs and overburn the tax system and overspend on capital, and it can be a complete disaster. So
I think you're describing the last 3 years.
Right.
I think that's what you're talking about.
Exactly. And this is kind of some of the stuff that compelled me. I mean, just so everyone knows, if they go to the website, they can see, but just so everyone knows, all 22 members of the task force got paid $0 for being part of the task force, right? This was all because we were passionate about it. We cared about this. We thought that we had some experience within our professional and personal lives to contribute to it. But this is not about us saying, yeah, this is what we're paid to say, right? This is us about saying, like, this is what we actually care about and why we actually care about it. So, so that's why we've been participating in that. And that's why we're looking at it through the different lenses that we are looking at it through today. Very
cool. Well, and another brick in your, we're not doing this for us necessarily. This is a Saturday afternoon, and I'm not paying him. We just chatted on Facebook, and I said, man, would you like to come and tell Guelph about this?
Yeah.
And he said, sure. And this is the time that worked out. So I really do appreciate your time. I really appreciate
Thank you for
coming on and talking about this with me. And I think it's important, because when people don't even understand the problem, and when people say, what are we doing? We're doing stuff. Yeah. There are people who are intelligent and in the business and who are looking at what technology can enable us to do and what it limits us in doing. Yeah. And we have to hit a balance. We have to hit a balance where you can afford your electricity, you can afford your food, you can afford to have a little extra for Christmas and a rainy day, and you can feel okay, comfortable that the environment is not going to betray you. And nobody's perfect. Nobody has a crystal ball. Nobody can see tomorrow or next week or next year. But man, if last year's an example and the year before, things are pretty good here. I want to keep them good here.
Exactly.
And that's it.
And we don't have to live a life of scarcity in order to be sustainable either, right? So that's the other message that I think is important, is like, we all can live a life of abundance if we focus on the right things and we take us in the right direction, and work together. And conversations like this help us all kind of align, right? We don't have to be exactly perfectly aligned in our belief system and our mission and our values, but if we can find some of the common benefits for us to collaborate and towards that, then we're doing the right things.
Right. And as you said, not everybody can do or has the ability to do or has even the need to do all of the things, all of the things on your list or whatever. I don't drive to work, right? So I work from home, which is fantastic. Right. It's fantastic. And I like that. That helps me. And that helps my family, and that helps everything within my neighborhood. I'm one less car on the road, right? I'm not driving down the 401 corridor.
You're having more conversations when you go down and get your coffee or whatever, right? Like, hopefully, socially.
But when you find something that you can make a difference with, and you look at that and say, I am doing my part. I am helping by doing this small thing. I am helping the whole. And looking and knowing that there's an entire city that's doing the same thing. Oh, thank you. That's doing the same thing, right? And I would hazard to guess that most Canadians have this on their mind because it's everywhere.
Yeah.
You cannot escape it, from the local newspaper to the global, not the global, I mean, yeah, the global ones too, but the Canadian wide ones too. Everybody is talking about this. And my point is, people are working, people are doing stuff, people are talking to the experts. I'm talking to the experts, and everybody's saying, with the level of technology we've got, declaring an emergency is not going to do anything other than nothing.
Stress us out.
Yeah, nothing. And
Right.
so why?
We're already stressed out enough.
We are. So thank you very much, Guelph. Thank you very much, Jonathan. I appreciate your time. And well, I'll see you next time. Oh yeah, and.